College football sickos, welcome home. It is Wednesday, May 22nd, 2024, the last one on the face of the planet. And guess what? We're still talking college football, not just a one segment kind of deal. We're talking for a full hour about the greatest sport on the face of the planet. The Jaden Rashada deal from yesterday kind of was something we didn't really have on the bingo card when it came to what to expect for this offseason in college football. But still, where does that leave Florida? Because yesterday, a lot of the oxygen in the room, deservedly so, was around Jaden Rashada and what he is alleging happened to him during his recruitment. But you look on the other side of that thing, Billy Napier and Florida, man, they got their work cut out for them on the field already. How does this factor in? You got a lot of folks saying, hey, is Billy Napier going to lose his job before the season even starts? I would say hold your horses on that one. We'll unpack that one together. Also, I don't know if you checked out this first month of the season, but we have a lot of games that I would define as college football playoff-ish because we expand to a 12-team field, so not every single game means as much as humanly possible as maybe it did in that 4-team field, but I still think it's fair for us to get together as a college football community and say, okay, well, hey, this is one you got to circle. This is one you got to look at in August and September. I think it's still going to define a lot of these teams and their postseason aspirations, or will at least have a very big impact on that for the duration of the rest of the 2024 season. Also, Miami, it's no secret, man. It's a pivotal year in a lot of ways for Mario Cristobal and the Canes. I mean, like this is year 3 of the Mario Cristobal era. Year 1, you kind of have the excuse built in there of, well, it's year 1. Well, Miami's still trying to get things rolling. You can't really fault him all the way, can you? And then year 2, you say, okay, it's some progress. Hey, that's good to see a little ROI there. Now, year 3 is, again, what I would define as the show-me-something year out there in Coral Gables. We'll break that down. Auburn catching a lot of flack. Have y'all noticed that? Auburn, everyone seems to be running to the message boards, into the Twitter sphere, and very, very quick to talk about the New Mexico State loss. Hey, we're going to talk about that too. That's something that needs to be factored in the formula of Auburn's aspirations in 2024. But at the exact same time, I think it's just one data point. You also have 2 other data points against Georgia and Alabama that I would say look pretty good if you're an Auburn Tiger fan. Now, the big talking point this offseason is the offense. What's the offense going to be? What's the offense going to be? Nick Brake and I talking about it off the air, talking about it on the air. What's the offense going to be? I think it's going to be a lot better. I think it's going to be a whole lot better than it was last season. Why, you might ask? We'll talk about that together. And then I put this prompt out on my Twitter page, @JDPiquel, and I asked y'all the important questions that we asked during the month of May in the college football world. If your favorite college football team is a fast food chain restaurant, who are they and why? Got a lot of great answers from y'all. We got almost 500 responses on that tweet. Phenomenal work from y'all. We appreciate you for that. Going to give you my breakdown of just a small number of teams that I think have a pretty strong correlation to certain fast food restaurants. All that on the docket for you. Super fired up to have you here. 2 things. You know the drill if you've been here before. Subscribe to the channel. Totally free. It boosts the show. It boosts all of us as a program. It helps us help you and do more content you want to see. Other part of that, make sure you subscribe to the podcasts, okay? Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You type in the Hard Count with JD Piquel. We're right there for you. We got you for road trips, got you for workouts. I know a lot of y'all listen to us at the gym. We're glad you're a part of this. Those are the 2 best ways to make sure that you are signed, sealed, delivered a part of this moving forward as we round the corner into that final stretch where we got media days, we got week 1, we got fall camp. We got a lot of things on the horizon. Don't miss any of it. So one thing that I want us to address before we get to those things that I talked about on the docket, have y'all noticed there's a lot of realignment buzz during this part of the college football calendar year? We had a UNC trustee say the other day he thinks North Carolina should try to get out of the ACC. The revenue distribution isn't right. And we saw that. We didn't really think that was worth talking about on this show for a couple of reasons. One, we just think that college football as a sport is what we like to celebrate on this show. We like talking about how your team recruits. We'll talk about the portal. But really, we want to talk about what's going on Saturdays. We want to talk about Auburn's offense. We want to talk about why Cam Ward's going to be a stud at Miami and why Florida's got a better chance than most people would like to assume going forward. We talk about the sport. And so while I think this is important, and we're going to definitely talk about things when they're substantial in the realignment world, it's not really so much something that us as diehard college football fans give a ton of attention to. The way that we talk about realignment on this show, we treat it a lot like how we treat Uber rides. Like, we all kind of know where this thing is going, right? Like, North Carolina is saying, hey, we also want out of the ACC. Go, get in line, take a number. It's kind of become common knowledge that the ACC is heading towards some very drastic changes. Florida State wants out. That's been made very, very obvious. Clemson, I believe they're suing the ACC. Like, there's a lot of parties now that are saying, hey, we want out of the ACC. So if you have enough noise from a lot of these big boys saying we want out, well, it's a matter of time before the big boys get their way. And you got lawyers, you got the Harvey Specter types, or the types that are against Harvey Specter in suits, if y'all are familiar with that show. They keep telling you it's ironclad, there's no way, the grant of rights. And like, I hear that. I hear a lot of that. Those are the same folks that told you Oklahoma and Texas couldn't leave for the SEC early. Y'all, they're going to be playing this upcoming season in the SEC. If you're just now joining us, they left early. The Pac-12, they told us, hey, there's no way that USC and UCLA, they joined the Big Ten. So a lot of the people that are naysayers on the front end typically end up being wrong on the back end. So the point I'm trying to make here is we already know where this Uber ride is heading. We know the final destination. Pretty confident in saying that Florida State, Clemson, sounds like North Carolina, and others will get out of the ACC. Now, where does that leave the ACC? I don't know. But if that's the destination, we get in that Uber, we know where we're headed, I'm not really going to say anything. I'm not really going to have a visible reaction until we arrive at the destination where I get out of the car, or unless something takes a wild turn, unless we get some report that says, hey, North Carolina, hearing very strong buzz, they're headed to the SEC. Okay, well, that's a little bit different. We'll talk about that together. But just to hear that these schools want out of the conference, yeah, no duh. We know that everybody wants out of the ACC right now. And if you're unsure as to why I'm saying that, the way that the revenue distribution model works for these schools is it is an even piece of the revenue pie given to every single school. So Florida State makes the same as Duke, makes the same as NC State, makes the same as Wake Forest. And if you're Florida State, you're baking that pie. Like, you're bringing home a fair amount of the ingredients for your conference to have that pie. So when you bake the pie, you should be able to get a bigger slice, right? And ACC is saying, nope, wrong. Not going to happen. Reason why it's not going to happen? Because if we want to give you a bigger piece of the pie, Florida State, well, then we got to go take a smaller slice for NC State, for Wake Forest, for Duke, for insert whatever ACC school you want to talk about. So going forward now, keep your head on the swivel for the realignment stuff. And when I say keep your head on the swivel, I'm speaking more so to just be slow to trust a lot of these reports. Because the other reason why we're slow to talk about realignment on this show and why we are typically on the reaction end when things happen is because that conversation around realignment is very much so controlled. Like, they only let us know what they want us to know. It's all very strategic. Things get out when people want them to get out when it comes to these conversations. There's not a whole lot of people in those rooms. It's not a locker room. It's not like this big PR push from different schools. Like, it is a couple of people in a room having a conversation, and then when stuff gets out, it's because it's a controlled narrative. So again, we're not going to be overly reactive to things that aren't concrete and to things that aren't actually tied to a specific school, to a specific conference. And I think all of us as college football fans, this is something just for us to chew on because we're not having games being played right now. But again, I would just encourage all of us to sit tight, link arms. Whenever you hear that realignment buzz, you hear that realignment talk, acknowledge it. Understand what they're talking about. Understand that it may or may not be factual in nature. And then once you read it, go back to YouTube, and if the show's already been on air, you can go watch it again. But I would also recommend you to go watch a full game college football rerun to kind of put your mind at ease and remind you what really is important when we talk about this sport. That is, of course, the sport itself. All right? So we appreciate realignment. We know it's a part of this whole future of college football moving forward. We understand the ACC, things are going to change. We know where the Uber is headed. We know the destination. Unless we take a wild turn or unless we actually arrive at the destination, you're not getting a whole lot of reaction from us just yet, all right? That's not to speak ill of anybody who is talking realignment. I'm just saying I don't know that all news is news when it comes to that whole discussion. Now, you know what is news? Jaden Rashada, yesterday morning, he is suing Billy Napier, the current head coach of the Florida Gators, a high-level booster at Florida, and a former recruiting staffer at Florida. This made massive waves yesterday for good reason. One, it's a very, very public NIL dispute situation going on. One of the first that we've had, definitely the first of this magnitude. Also, the details of the whole situation are a little bit interesting because you got a quarterback who has now ended up at the rival school in Georgia suing the rival in Florida and their head coach. So, yeah, that's going to add a little bit more drama to this whole thing. But I think yesterday a lot of the discussion was around Jaden Rashada and around what it means for his camp and about what it means for him and what allegedly happened to him. And I think we also have to acknowledge that, but look to the other side of that whole thing. Where does this leave Florida? Where does this leave Billy Napier? What does it mean for them going forward? We'll talk about it right now. If you're watching live right now, we appreciate you. Quick plug. Make sure you're subscribed. Okay, subscribe button under the picture. If you're watching as a one-off cut, we're glad to have y'all here. It's college football, nothing but college football every single day of the year. Yes, when they're playing games. When they're not playing games, we're talking ball. Also on podcast, Spotify, Apple, at JD Pickell. Subscribe there, or Spotify, Apple, the hard counts with JD Pickell. Social plug there as well, at JD Pickell if you want to follow me there. We appreciate that. Bottom line, just get tuned into everything. Podcast, socials, YouTube. Helps us help you. Thank you for that. A big question everyone was asking when this news broke yesterday was, okay, whoa, hey, it's pretty serious. This is pretty serious stuff we're talking about here. Jaden Rashada is alleging that Billy Napier, high-level booster, former recruiting staffer, all did everything they could to get his commitment, which they eventually got when he flipped from Miami to Florida. And then they're saying, well, they did everything in their power to also make sure they didn't have to pay him that NIL money that they had agreed upon. The original contract was $13.85 million. So, yeah, if I'm Jaden Rashada, I'm going to have an issue if I don't get that money. I understand the contract was terminated, all that stuff. I'd have a problem, too, if you are going to pay me darn near $14 million and I don't get it. So I understand that whole part of it. But going back to what I was saying, the question that people were asking as soon as this broke of, oh, Billy Napier, he's cooked. He's cooked, right? This is Florida's out. This is their chance to fire him. And Nick De La Torre from Gators Online, I thought made a really good point in all of this from a legal perspective. Is Billy Napier going to lose his job before the season? No. From a legal perspective, as Nick says, there's no proof that the $1 million that was allegedly promised to Jaden Rashada to sign on signing day was a reality. Like, there's no text there to support this claim as of right now, time of us being live. There's also no voice recording that we have right now, but even if there was, Florida and California where the Rashadas are, and Florida where Billy Napier is, it's a two-party consent state, which essentially just means both parties, Napier and the Rashadas, need to know and agree to that whole voice recording situation. The way that Nick describes it, it's a rabbit hole, so I don't think that's necessarily going to happen. I don't think we're going to get super condemning evidence that this whole situation played out the way that the Rashadas are alleging. Now, we might, or maybe that evidence may come to light, but we'll never hear of it. The bottom line, I don't think legally there's enough there as of right now for Florida to fire Billy Napier. The other thing is I don't think they should for a couple of reasons. The first is right now, with what I just said, the actual concrete, hard and fast proof that these things happened is lacking. Pete Nako said it yesterday. Right now, it's a lot of he said versus he said. And he said versus he said doesn't cause you to lose your job. I don't think it causes you to lose your job for cause. That's the first part. The other thing is the way that I felt when this whole thing broke was a little bit conflicting because you read those reports and you're like, man, if that's true, it's messed up. Messing with a kid's life. The other part is I don't know that I can buy in 100% to the things that are being said just yet. Again, if there's proof, and we'll unpack it more. So I want to speak carefully here. But with what we have right now, I don't think this disqualifies Billy Napier as a coach. Like, yes, you're still responsible. You're still the CEO of your whole organization. And if those things did happen, if those things are proven to be true, different conversation. But right now, the way that I'm looking at this thing, NIL was a brand new thing for the most part when Jaden Rashada was in high school and people were still trying to figure it out. The way that it looks and feels to me is that NIL with Jaden Rashada was figured out on the fly. And when things are thrown together on the fly, man, usually there's more margin for things to go wrong. There's more potential for us to have some hiccups and some issues. And so I'm not saying that there wasn't, selfish motives on either side of this thing to try and do what's in the best interest of both Jaden Rashada's camp and of Florida's camp. But I do think it's tough for me to say, okay, we're going to fire a guy because of a brand new thing, which is NIL in the college landscape, and that's reason for us to just terminate him. I don't see that. I think when you look at what you hired Billy Napier to do, it was to win football games. Now, has that happened to the degree you'd like it to at Florida just yet? No. But I do think that if you're looking at him just as a football coach, this isn't like a football coach job description 10 years ago. This is a brand new thing added to the, you want to be a football coach at the D1 level, at the SEC level. This is brand new. Guys are figuring this out. The real thing that I think we should look at here is the optics for Florida. That's the tough part for me, the optics for Florida. Because if I'm a recruit and I'm looking at the Gators and I got 4 or 5 stars next to my name, how often do you think questions about the Rashada situation are going to be asked now going forward? My guess is darn near 100% of the time. My guess is every single kid that has some potential to go play at the University of Florida is going to say, well, hey, coach, I love Florida. I'm excited about this opportunity. I appreciate the offer. I like the NIL package we're talking about here, but also Jaden Rashada probably liked the NIL package as well. How do I know this isn't going to happen to me? And that's a tough discussion to have. Like, at best, you're having to reassure. At worst, you're probably losing some kids. Now, I don't know exactly how these different recruits are going to view this going forward. Again, that former staffer is no longer there. Have to believe that if you're Florida, you are even more on your P's and Q's in the NIL world because of a situation like this arising. But I'm just saying, I don't think this helps the optics at the very least if you're Florida. Now, when we look at what this means going forward in 2024, I've already established I don't think this is a situation that causes Billy Napier to lose his job before the season. It just adds more pressure to an already pressure-packed season for Billy Napier and the Gators. The schedule is the Hunger Games. We've said that many times. But you know what I think would really do a lot for this situation, do a lot for Billy Napier? Winning. Winning. We talk about it a lot on this show. The win-loss goggles are a very, very real thing. If Billy Napier in Florida go out there and win 9 games in 2024, that's asking a lot with this schedule. Let's just say they go ahead and they win big. They blow that 5.5 preseason win total out of the water. You know what they're saying about this situation? Well, NIL was new. And look at, Billy Napier clearly has his organization in a good spot. That Jaden Rashada thing must have been an outlier. He clearly knows what he's doing as the head coach for Florida. Like, they just won 9 ball games. They won 8 ball games. Yeah, we're not too worried about that whole situation right now. It was an outlier. It was a one-off. There's a lot of built-in goodwill if you start winning football games. This thing becomes much less of a big deal for the people that are making the calls when it comes to the head coaching position and who's that head coach at Florida going forward. Now, if you lose, it gives some more life to the Steve Spurrier comments that he made earlier in this year, saying, we love Billy Napier in the way that he is a family man. He works hard, but I just wish things were a little bit more tidy. People start to give you less benefit of the doubt around the Jaden Rashada situation. It's like, hey, they lost football games, and the whole Jaden Rashada thing blew up in our face over the offseason when we're trying to get ready to go win ball games. Like, is this really a situation we want to persist long-term? I think the real fear here is what happens if you go 6-6 or 7-5, which I've said multiple times, 7-5, man, with that schedule, Florida might be like a top 30 team in the country if they go 7-5 with that schedule. It's ridiculous. But if you're 7-5 or 6-6, at that point, you could be looking at a very real 50-50 split when it comes to the opinion around keeping Billy Napier for another season. And my concern is this Jaden Rashada allegations, regardless of what ends up coming or not coming from it, could swing that thing 1% in the wrong direction for Billy Napier. So I don't know how this is going to be perceived. A lot of this is still ongoing. Again, if we get more evidence, if we get more information, we will have a new opinion. That's just how this whole thing works. We're operating with the opinion and assumptions we have right now. However, to recap it, Billy Napier, don't think he's getting fired. That's first off. Second, don't think he should get fired. NIL is wacky. NIL is new at that point in time. It's become a lot more structured since then, I believe. I think we're headed towards a much more structured system in the future. It's headed in the right direction. Dealing with NIL as an SEC head coach, brand new to the job description. So If it ends up being true, we'll talk about, or if those allegations end up being true and we get concrete proof of that, we'll talk about it another way. But I don't see a way where you fire Billy Napier before the season, and if you win, the win-loss goggles come out and the vibes change very, very quickly if you're a Florida Gator fan or in that Florida Gator camp. College football playoff is expanding. It is 12 teams for this upcoming season and the year after, and then after that, going to 14 teams. But with just this season, with what we're going to look at right now, have y'all looked at the schedule? I'm not talking about the playoff. I'm talking about the regular season. This first month of the season is going to be dynamite, man. It's going to be phenomenal. From August 31st, the latest game I'm going to talk about here in this segment is like September 13th. We got a great lineup, man. Got a great lineup. And I think the concern for a lot of us, myself included, as we go to a larger playoff field, does that mean the regular season has less value in it? Now, the unavoidable conversation is you can probably get in the playoff. You can get in the playoff with more losses. So in that way, yeah, not every single game has the exact same level of importance on it. But I do think it's worth us talking this through. There are some games in this first month of the season that are playoff-ish in nature. They may not set the course for what they're going to do in the postseason, but I do think they give us a pretty good gauge for what they have to do the rest of the way. Kind of a providing the rest of the route to the college football playoff for the rest of these teams. So let's get right to it, man. August 31st, Notre Dame is at Texas A&M. That's going to be cinematic. College game day is going to be there. If y'all know me, you know I'm a college game day stan. Like, that's just how you get your Saturday morning started. They're going to be in College Station. Both of these teams are trying to break into that college football playoff field with us now having 12 teams. Notre Dame's got the most juice they've had on offense in a long time. Riley Leonard, a lot of optimism. Wide receiver room, I said it yesterday, most dynamic that it's been in a long, long time. For A&M, they're like, hey, we got some new direction. We've always had good parts. Now we got a new driver to really kick this thing into gear and allow us to achieve our potential. Is that going to happen? Starts with game one. Why I think this is a playoff-ish kind of game, Notre Dame and their unique situation with being independent and having no conference title game, I don't think they're getting in with 2 losses. I think you got to be 11-1 at least if you're Notre Dame. And maybe even at that point, it's another conversation. But 2 losses, I'd feel nervous if I were an Irish fan. And if you lose this game, you still have Louisville, you still have Florida State, and then you go to USC. If you drop this game and have to win out, I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying the blood pressure for our friends in South Bend, Indiana would be a little bit higher than you want it to. A little bit higher than you want it to. You win this game, maybe the vibes are higher and things get a little bit more loose out there in South Bend. But I'm just saying, very, very big playoff kind of game for Notre Dame to start the year. Now for A&M, in a similar fashion, I think they could go 10-2 and make the playoff. 10-2, maybe you're not controlling your destiny how you would like to, but I think you got to feel okay about your chances, being that you're in the SEC. If you start 0-1, though, and you turn away from that game and look at the rest of your horizon for what you have to do that season, you got to go to Florida, you got Missouri, you got LSU, you're at Auburn, and I think Auburn's going to be sneaky. Auburn at Jordan-Hare is another beast in itself. And oh, by the way, you got to play Texas to finish the season. Rivalry kind of game. Throw logic out the window kind of game. This is the first year for Mike Elko clearly in College Station. So what I would like to make sure we're on the same page about with this team, the way that they start is going to be massive for belief. I'm not talking about belief in the Ted Lasso sense. I'm talking about like real deal confidence within yourself, knowing that, okay, we go forward here. We are good enough to beat top 10, top 5 kind of teams in the country. Like Notre Dame, if you're able to beat them that first game and you're still getting your sea legs, you look at that Texas game totally different. You look at that game against LSU, totally different. So if they can get that win, create some confidence, that'd be huge. But if they lose that game and they got to go 10-1 the rest of the way to even have a chance at the college football playoff, a Texags message board will be intense, to say the least. It'll be intense. September 7th, or actually, you know what? Let's stay August 31st. We'll talk about Texas at Michigan in a second. August 31st, you got Georgia and Clemson in Atlanta. Now, I've said this before. I'm not backing off this statement. I don't think this game is going to be competitive. Vegas doesn't either. They got Georgia as a 2-score favorite. But with that being said, let's walk this through. If Clemson does win this game, one, I will look very, very foolish, and we'll have a discussion together, and there'll be a full public apology, so we'll go from there. But if Clemson wins this game, man, that turns the entire tide on how we view them going forward. Because God bless Clemson, but they don't have anybody more difficult than Georgia on the schedule, and that's just a fact. It's just a fact. Yeah, you got to play Florida State. You got to play NC State. You got Louisville. But if you beat Georgia, who else are you supposed to, quote unquote, lose to? Who else is like better than Georgia on your schedule the rest of the season? I don't think so. Also, the kind of swag you have if you beat Georgia and you're Clemson, through the roof probably, the belief through the roof, as we mentioned with a team like Texas A&M and how they started the year. If you lose to Georgia, though, again, going back to that 10-2 label, kind of getting into the college football playoff, I think that's what a team like Clemson would need at the very least. Playing those teams like I just mentioned and having to go undefeated, especially that game at Florida State, not the way you want to live. Not the way you want to live in the slightest. Now, if you're Georgia, you're in hunting mode to start the year. That's pretty obvious. They're going to have a bullseye on their back. Everyone and their mama's got them as the number 1 or number 2 best team in the country. Goes without saying. But if you lose that game to start the season, you're staring down the barrel of at Bama, at Texas, licking your wounds a little bit, probably go into fight or flight mode. Not saying Georgia couldn't still get it done and get to the college football playoff with 2 losses, but I don't think that's a situation you want to find yourself in if you're Georgia. Because I think it's going to be very difficult to go at Bama, at Texas, at Ole Miss, Tennessee, and be unscathed. I'm just saying. Not a prediction. I'm just saying. You're looking at all those tests. Depending on how those teams shape up during the course of the season, they've got some roster talent to make it a very, very interesting game against the Dogs. But if you win, clearly you set a good course. Still keep those 2 mulligans in your back pocket. Very, very much so a playoff-ish kind of game, I think, for both teams. Maybe not the playoff game, like lose or go home, but definitely makes it a steep climb for all involved if they end up losing. Now, let's go to September 7th, as I just mentioned a second ago. Texas at Michigan. Week 2, baby. Big noon. Big noon gets some shade because I think it's not the prime time, like night kind of game. I love big noon. I think especially when it's at a Big Ten campus, it just feels right to me. Just feels like it's kind of like their version of prime time, if you will. Regardless, Texas at Michigan. Michigan is trying to plant the flag for this new squad. It's been well documented. 128th in returning production are the Wolverines. New head coach, new quarterback, new coordinators. A lot of new at Michigan. But you go out and beat Texas, who's going to start the year within the top 5. That could be the equivalent for Michigan of what Texas did last year at Alabama. Get them some juice. Get them some confidence. View yourself a different way when you look in the mirror. View yourself a different way when you're going through practice. Create some real belief for some guys that are going to be contributing in a very meaningful way for the first time throughout their college career. Now, for Texas, they feel like they should have been in the national title game last year. They feel like they should have played Michigan for the whole deal last season. This is their chance to make a statement. New team for sure, but their chance to go make a statement their first year with a new conference, go to the Big Ten as an SEC member, and go represent their conference the way they'd like to. Why it's a playoff-ish kind of game? Again, outside of Notre Dame, I think 10-2 is going to at least put you in that conversation to be in the college football playoff. Texas losing that game, they have to go and only lose one of the following: Oklahoma, Georgia, Florida, Kentucky at A&M. That game against Georgia in itself, I think, is enough to make sure you need to get this game if you're Texas. Michigan, same deal. They have to go and play. They play USC, they play Oregon, they play Ohio State. They're at Ohio State to finish the season. Like, you can't lose mulligans with those teams left on the docket. So for both sides, it's a big vibe setter, a big tone setter for the rest of the season. It's only week 2, but I think that's going to really set a very clear course for both sides of that whole battle. Last one to talk about here, the Big 12, man. I understand it doesn't have the same brand power as it did when Texas and OU were in that conference, but like, it's going to be some good football played in the Big 12 conference this upcoming season. I'll say this. I don't know what the record will be for a Big 12 team to make it in with an at-large bid, but I would just, if I'm a Big 12 team, I would assume it is going to be knockout gladiator style every single week, and I would assume within that conference it's going to be very difficult to finish as a non-conference champion and get in. Like I would go forward as a Big 12 team of like, hey, if we want to be in that 12-team deal, we got to win the conference. We got to win the conference because we already know the benefit of the doubt is going to the Big Ten. It's going to the SEC. Do not put your fate in the College Football Playoff Committee's hands. So you got Arizona at Kansas State. Spooky vibes. Friday, September 13th. All right, so Friday the 13th in Manhattan, Kansas. I'm just assuming that's going to be a night game. Both those teams right now in Arizona and Kansas State are kind of the trendy college football playoff picks. The Brent Brennan era begins at Arizona. Avery Johnson and that era with him playing quarterback out there, that begins with this season. Arizona, if they lose this game, they still got at Utah, Texas Tech, which I think will be sneaky. They're at BYU, which is always a tough place to play. They got to go to UCF, with who knows what they're going to be. And Kansas State, also at BYU, Oklahoma State. They're at Colorado. They're at West Virginia, Kansas, at Iowa State. Like, you cannot lose this game for either side of this thing because it's a massive, I think it will be a tiebreaker when it comes down to who makes it into that Big 12 title game in Jerry World. This game could very well be a massive part in that. And also just pole position to get to the Big 12 title game. If this is your ticket, this game is going to be playoff-esque in nature for both sides of this thing. And everyone's looking at Arizona and saying, Jed Fish has gone to Washington. Magic's gone out there. I mean, I don't know if it is. They bring back 66% of the production from last year's squad that won 10 ball games. Tetairoa McMillan, Noah Fafita, a lot of key pieces back for Arizona. So that one will be a battle. Tune on Friday night. That'll be a really, really good game period and a really, really intense, I think, playoff-ish kind of atmosphere. So Notre Dame at A&M, Texas at Michigan, Georgia and Clemson in Atlanta, and Arizona at Kansas State on Friday the 13th. All playoff-ish games, if you're asking me. So keep an eye on those. Keep an eye on those. We'll keep a good thing going here. Hey, appreciate everyone that's dialed in live. Go ahead and make sure that you like the video, like the show. Just helps us, again, do more of what you want to see. Would love to be over 100 likes before we get off the air. So that little thumbs up icon under your picture would be greatly appreciated. Go ahead and click that for us. All right. So we talked about Florida already in this show, but I think Miami has a lot at stake this year. Like we talk about pressure on Florida, I think there's a ton of pressure on Miami. This could be a pivotal year for the Canes in 2024. And the reason for that being, this is a chance for Miami and Mario Cristobal in year 3 to use this season as a billboard at the high school recruiting level. And you're saying, JD, they've already been killing it at the high school recruiting level. They absolutely have. Do not misunderstand me. Top 10 class in 2023, top 5 class in 2024. But when you look at the way they're adding talent right now, I think some of that is Mario Cristobal just being a dog on the recruiting trail. That's obvious. Plus their resources, plus the trajectory they're headed towards, like those things are all factoring in. That usually will only play a large factor the first 2 seasons for a head coach. The third year, it's like, okay, show me something. Third year, it's like, hey, where's the hardware? Show me the return on investment here if I'm a recruit to go and play for you. But if they win, if Miami goes out and wins the ACC or they make the college football playoff and things like that, that opens up the floodgates for what they're going to do in acquiring talent. It's also worth noting now, it's all on paper at Miami. It's all there on paper. There is not a yeah, but built in for Miami, where previously the first year you say, yeah, but it was first year on the job. Year 2 you say, yeah, but, they didn't have a quarterback, it turns out. Their first year OC, still trying to figure it out together. First year DC for Miami. Like they're trying to get some things together. You're not saying that this year. You're looking at this roster and you're saying, okay, quarterback and Cam Ward, who was one of the best dudes in the portal. Offensive line, Francis Mauanoa, stud, along with what they have on the rest of that offensive line. Defensive lineman now, you got Simeon Barrow Jr. through the portal. You got Ruben Bain, who's back for more. Added a playmaker on the offensive side of the ball, wide receiver in Sam Brown. Damian Martinez at running back, who's a 2,000-yard guy, his 2 years in college so far. Like, you understand what I'm saying here? If you're looking at this roster and you're looking at the way this organization is built, there's not a whole lot of reasons where you say, that makes sense. That's why they weren't successful. Those aren't there anymore. Those aren't there. Everything is there on paper. And so to be able to be successful in 2024 and achieve all they want to achieve, that sends the message loud and clear that, hey, when you give us what we need as a staff, if you come to Coral Gables, we will utilize you, we will develop you, and guess what? We're going to win ball games. And I've said this a lot on this show, but if you are the school of choice in the state of Florida, I don't think we can overstate the impact that can have on what your team can accomplish. Like if you start stockpiling classes with talent from that state, you're probably winning conferences. You're probably making the college football playoff. Heck, I'll go ahead and say I wouldn't be surprised if they start winning national championships. Major if they recruit the state of Florida consistently at a top-tier level. Reason for that being, you look at the NFL draft just this past season. Look at this most recent NFL draft. The state of Florida had the most dudes drafted. 30. I didn't say 13, 30 dudes drafted from that state alone. Now, I'm biased. I love my home state of California. Lived in Texas for a long time. Numbers don't lie, man. Like numbers aren't lying to you here. To have that many dudes drafted from one state, what does that tell you? If you lock down the state, if you end up being the school of choice in the state, I think you have some pretty good things on the horizon for you for your football team. And I'll also say this, I think a lot of kids want to go play at Miami. They need a reason to do so. This is a smaller storyline, though, built in here. Transfer portal quarterback recruiting isn't going anywhere. Look at the best odds to win the national title over at FanDuel. Of those top 5 teams, 3 of those top 5 teams will be playing a starting quarterback from the transfer portal. So if Cam Ward goes out there and balls, I think that sends a pretty strong sales pitch for Mario Cristobal, for Shannon Dawson, the rest of their time in Coral Gables, that, hey, if you want to come play here, look at what Cam Ward did. Hey, you're a high-level FCS guy. Hey, you were a high-level G5 guy at the quarterback position. Maybe you're a power conference quarterback, and you're just looking for a new home. You can help us. Cam Ward came here, and he won the ACC. Cam Ward came here. We made the college football playoff. The sales pitch you can make if he has success, the way that Miami expects to have success going forward, that's massive. That's absolutely incredible. And Miami's interesting in the sense that if they get momentum, a lot of people make jokes about the way the stadium's not filled up and about the lack of buzz around the university right now in their football team when it comes to what they do on Saturdays and their lack of success. If you end up winning out there, it's a lot like USC to me in the sense that if you're not winning, there's other things to do. But if you are winning, that place will buy in tenfold. The juice around Miami when they start winning will be very, very palpable, and that in itself is just a snowball effect. Makes it better for recruits when they come visit. You watch a broadcast on TV, you say, oh, Miami, they got something cooking over there. Like there's a lot of things that can really add some more fuel to this fire. But again, the key piece of this, you got to start winning. You got to win at a high level. They've made major strides from year 1 to year 2. Year 2 to year 3, we'll see what happens. But again, this is a chance to be a massive billboard year at the high school level for recruits. You lock down the state of Florida, you're probably winning championships to some degree. And if you are able to have success with Cam Ward, or just transfers, period, Simeon Barrow, Damian Martinez, Sam Brown, if you have success at the transfer level, especially the quarterback position, that's a pretty nice sales pitch to make going forward, because I think the portal is only going to become increasingly important when it comes to the makeup of championship football teams in college ball. So Miami, man, pivotal year, billboard year of sorts for the Canes out there in Coral Gables. Now, speaking of pivotal years, man, Auburn, we went on the Paul Feinbaum show, I believe it was Monday, and sat down with him, talked through a lot of great things across the SEC, and he asked me, hey, who's a team in the middle of the pack in the SEC that you think is maybe set to make a jump? And I said Auburn, for reasons about to mention here in just a moment, but we put that clip on social media. A lot of pushback, and a lot of the pushback came from the game against New Mexico State and what the offense didn't do, and Peyton Thorne and how he wasn't successful last year. And I think we got to talk about that together, because everything that you believe about Auburn in 2024 more than likely is going to be tied to what you think Peyton Thorne's going to be in 2024. And so that's a fair thing to talk about, but I think we got to zoom out a little bit and say, what's the offense going to be in 2024? There's a lot of different ways to say this. People are saying, well, it's, Hugh Freeze isn't calling the plays because Coach Nix is calling the plays. Listen, whoever's calling the plays is another discussion. I'm of the opinion that it's going to be a Hugh Freeze show to begin with. So what's Auburn going to do offensively in 2024, and why is it going to work? We'll talk about that. Auburn's going to run the football. You think about Hugh Freeze, you think about quarterbacks, think about scoring points. That's all true. I think there's a lot of validity in that, but their goal is to run the football. That's number one. Last year, Auburn ran the football really effectively. 186 yards a game, top 25 in the country. 4.8 yards a carry, top 30 in the country. So those pieces, I believe, are very much so still there, starting with Jarquez Hunter. If the offense is the meal that we're putting together here, it doesn't start without the butter within that dish. It doesn't start without the key ingredient. Key ingredient, running the football. Okay, that's getting us to a starting point. Now, everyone talks about Hugh Freeze and his system. It is a run-pass option system. So if I'm Peyton Thorne playing quarterback, on a pretty high percentage of our plays, I have the option to hand it, or if I get the look that I want, I can pull it and throw it out to one of our playmakers. Last season, I don't think, one, that it's fair to judge this upcoming season by last season because of what I just mentioned. It's a Hugh Freeze kind of show. And when you saw Hugh Freeze last season, just if we're going to go ahead and use that as the best sample size for us going forward, Hugh Freeze last season, when he got control of the offense, there's a very different look to it, a very different tempo to it, a very different feel to it. The games that, from what I understand, he had the most influence on were the Georgia game, the Alabama game. What did we say? They're going to try and run the football. Georgia and Alabama, Auburn played to a one-score loss. Now, you don't get credit for losing close, but I think it's fair for us to use it as a data point. In both those games, they ran for over 200 yards, and their quarterback threw for less than 100 yards. Now, throwing for less than 100 yards is not an impressive feat, but I do think it's worth noting they played those teams so close, two of the best rosters in college football, two of the best head coaches in college football, and Kirby Smart and Nick Saban respectively, play them that close with no changeup pitch. Like, Hugh Freeze is dialing it up, playing in, play out, messing with the second level of the defense. You got the read option with Peyton Thorne. You got zone, like all those things, inside zone, outside zone, all those things are happening, but you can't throw the football and you still played them to a one-score loss. What does that mean for the future? What does that mean when they do develop a little bit of something downfield, throw the football? I think it's worth just assuming a little bit there may be some steps made offensively in that department with Hugh Freeze now getting the entire offseason, entire spring ball, entire fall camp to build on those games and build on what he's done since installing that offense at Auburn and what they're going to be in 2024. Now, the real talking point for a lot of folks, as we mentioned at the top of this segment, it's going to start and end with Peyton Thorne. And I understand that, man. I understand that. I'm not pushing back on that. He's the quarterback, right? Like, you got to have some juice to you. You got to have a little bit of it factor to you if we want to have success offensively. At the quarterback position, it starts with you. So the reason for optimism for me with Peyton Thorne, yes, the Hugh Freeze thing is extremely important. It's a more comfortable offense, I believe, for him going forward. And we mentioned it being an RPO-centric offense. People throw shade at Peyton Thorne, and the RPO system, he was pretty good. Like, if you follow StatCat, who does the Lord's work for us here at On 3, he went and tracked Peyton Thorne's RPO passing numbers. He was 70% completion percentage, 7 yards an attempt on the RPO game. So you're telling me that RPO game is going to get more dangerous with Hugh Freeze and us running for in the neighborhood of 200 yards a game? That's going to open up some passing lanes. That's going to make his job a little bit easier. Again, in a scheme and a system that he's already proven in a small sample size he can be successful in with a better play caller to call a spade with Hugh Freeze. I think that's extremely fair to say. And then you look at the other part of this. Hugh Freeze has to be mentioned. He's going to have a voice in Peyton Thorne's ear during the game. I'm not talking about like the Obi-Wan Kenobi use the Force Luke kind of vibe. I'm talking about like you now have a radio in your helmet if you're the quarterback that doesn't shut off until 15 seconds left on the play clock. So, I mean, Andy Staples talked about it on his show yesterday when Hugh Freeze was at Liberty and Malik Willis was his quarterback. When they didn't have a radio, Hugh Freeze would give him a little signal like, hey, throw to this dude. Like, he is just drawing it up, telling him very blatantly, put the football to this person. He can now do that with a walkie-talkie in my guy's ear. Like, come on now. It's fair to have a little bit of an expectation that maybe, just maybe, Peyton Thorne could be better this upcoming season than last season. And now we also have to address the weapons. Like we mentioned, Hugh Freeze, mentioned the scheme. They're going to be run pass, run first, run pass option as a whole to, run to throw the football is kind of the sentiment we want to get at there. Better play caller, all those things. The weapons they have this year compared to last year, I think it's night and day. And Cam Coleman, he's only a freshman, but he's only a freshman in terms of what it says on the bio. In terms of physical giftings, dude has proven behind closed doors from talking to people during spring practice and then in front of closed doors, I guess open doors. He's proved during the spring game that he is an absolute stud. He's ready to go right now. Getting up to speed in the offense is going to be a factor. We'll see how that progresses. At the end of the day, though, you have a dude to throw the football to in Cam Coleman. That's obvious. What I love that Auburn did, though, they went and got Keandre Lambert-Smith from Penn State. What does he bring to the table? Stick a dynamite kind of player, baby. Keandre Lambert-Smith averaged right around 13 yards of reception last year at Penn State. Auburn last season was right around 6 yards in attempt passing the football last year. So I'm just saying now, you add a little bit more hot sauce into that offense, things could be headed in a better direction, being able to have Keandre Lambert-Smith on one side, Cam Coleman on the other side, and then Rivaldo Fairweather, who was the leading receiver last year for Auburn as a tight end. He's still there. We saw him during spring practice. Dude looks like he could be Mr. Olympia. He's put together. Like, having all three of those cats at different levels of the field, defenses are going to have to make scholarship decisions. Going to have to make NIL decisions with how they want to try and defend all three of those cats. So Peyton Thorne, the pressure is still on you to deliver, but I think the scheme in itself, giving him more RPO kind of plays, having a great stable of backs to hand it to, and having a great play caller in Hugh Freeze, and now more weapons, like a lot of these things are teed up now for Peyton Thorne, I think, to have a lot more success this upcoming season than he did last year. We've talked about this a lot on this show, but I'll say it one more time. I don't think you can quantify how much experience matters for a guy like Peyton Thorne and how much being comfortable at a place and in a system matters. Last year, y'all, like, he missed spring ball. It's one of our transfer portal rules on this show, and Peyton Thorne is a big reason why we have that rule. You don't take your starting quarterback when you've missed all of spring practice. Why? Because those 15 practices are the most important part of your season to get everyone on the same page schematically. It's very difficult to pick it up during fall camp, very difficult to win a team in fall camp. So Peyton Thorne, and we talked to Hugh Freeze about this, he wasn't comfortable for the duration of last season, is my opinion. Hugh Freeze is like, yeah, he missed spring ball. It showed. It is what it is. So the New Mexico State game, it's going to get a lot of play on social media, and we understand that. It is what it is. They should not have lost to New Mexico State. But I think to have that define them is as irresponsible than to allow Georgia and Alabama to have those two games define them. To me, those are all data points. New Mexico State, low data point. Playing Georgia to the final drive, playing Alabama to the final play, two pretty positive data points. So what do we do with data? We read it, and we make our own inference from it. To me, I think there's a lot of pieces there for Auburn. I think the new play calling with Hugh Freeze will be drastically improved from a season ago, and I think Peyton Thorne is set up at the very least for a lot more success than what he had a season ago. So for Auburn, we'll see what happens, but we stand by what we said. We think Auburn is set to make a massive jump in 2024. How massive? 8-9 wins would not surprise me in the slightest. And I think we talk about Hugh Freeze in a very different way this time next year if that ends up being the case and what Auburn could be competing for college football playoff berths and things like that beyond. Should be a lot of fun. Should be a lot of fun, as it always is, man. College football is the most fun sport on the face of the planet, and we're glad to have y'all a part of this show. Glad to have y'all tuned in. So if you've tuned in for a length of time, you know we typically will do a live chat at the end of this show. When I say we'll do a live chat, we will literally have a chat live together, getting to y'all's responses in the live chat, and we answer them in real time on this platform. Not doing that today, so still like the video, still subscribe to the channel. Come back tomorrow, and we'll have a more in-depth question and answer period for y'all at the end of tomorrow's show. But a great way to interact with us, and we've said this many times, if you're following me on the social channels, that is a really nice platform for us on Instagram and on Twitter, at JD Pickell. A perfect platform for us to just kind of throw topics your way, see what you think of them. Sometimes they may be things like, what are the great unknowns in college football? Sometimes we're asking ridiculous questions like, hey, if your favorite college football team was a fast food restaurant, who would they be? And so I got 4 different teams I want to talk about here that correlate to 4 different fast food restaurants, and just kind of trying to do the Lord's work here when we talk about college football in the most digestible way possible, pun intended. Clemson, to me, is Chick-fil-A. This is kind of the genesis that this whole segment is built on. Say, JD, Chick-fil-A is phenomenal. I understand. Guess what? Clemson, at one point in time, was also phenomenal. Went out and qualified for 6 different college football playoff berths when it was a 4-team playoff. The reason why Clemson is Chick-fil-A to me is because Clemson and Chick-fil-A both do things their own way, right? Like Dabo Swinney, he says, nope, not using the portal. Sorry about it. Actually, I'm not sorry about it. We're going to do things our way here. We're not making any apologies. Chick-fil-A, they say Sunday, better find a second favorite chicken restaurant because we're closed on Sunday. We're not sorry about it either. And the thing with that, for the longest time, nobody batted an eye at Dabo not using the portal. You want to know why? Because of what I just said. They were reeling off college football playoff appearances. They were just showing up there every single year. It's like, oh, Clemson's back. Good. The product that Clemson had was second to none. It was top tier. It was chef's kiss. It was like the original chicken sandwich. I'm personally a fan of the spicy chicken sandwich. That's not here or there. For Chick-fil-A, you're okay with them being closed because they give you the best product in all of fast food for my money. You don't care they're closed on Sunday. As long as they give you the phenomenal stuff Monday through Saturday, like, we're all good. However, though, if Chick-fil-A were to start giving you a subpar product, people would have an issue with that, right? People would say, actually, that's kind of lame that y'all are closed on Sunday. Actually, I'm not quite okay with that. People are starting to say that about Clemson. Hey, no problem if you're making the college football playoff, but when you miss the college football playoff 3 years in a row, this whole not using the portal thing, actually, that's kind of lame. Actually, maybe you could use the portal. So both do things their own way, and they're okay with that as long as you give them the best product that the market has to offer. But when that doesn't happen, things start to change a little bit. Texas A&M, next up on our list here. Texas A&M is Whataburger. And I'm speaking directly to our audience in the beautiful state of Texas, because Whataburger has a massive brand, much like Texas A&M, in the Lone Star State. Like, if you don't live in the state of Texas, you probably have a, one, no idea what I'm talking about, or two, drastically different opinion on Whataburger. I think that's the exact same thing with Texas A&M. In the state, people are like, hey, A&M, it's a massive brand. There's a lot to like. Kind of a cult-like following in a way, like the same thing with Whataburger. People are all in on Whataburger. They swear by it. And I think the product for both of those, what they have in-house, is solid. Like, if you ever had a honey butter chicken biscuit from Whataburger, like, vibes are high, man. It's a delicacy. It's a delicacy. However, the problem with Whataburger and the problem with A&M, for my money, is the direction and the consistency. We've seen A&M have a lot of great product in-house. What'd they do with it? I've had a lot of really good experiences at Whataburger. Y'all, I'll be honest, I've also had some not-so-great experiences at Whataburger. I've heard some horror stories about Whataburger. So I'm great with that honey butter chicken biscuit when you give it to me, but if I don't get it consistently, what's the point? What are we doing here? And the real thing for me here when it comes to Whataburger is if they had their ducks in a row, if I was getting 10 out of 10 every single time I stepped foot in that establishment, they'd be a national power. Same thing with A&M. If they got their ducks in a row and they were able to maximize the pieces internally, how good is A&M? I think they'd be a national power. I think we're talking about them being a college football playoff team year in and year out. Heck, they might have already made the college football playoff in this discussion if they had their ducks in a row previously under Jimbo Fisher. So A&M for me is Whataburger. Staying with the regional theme here, USC is In-N-Out Burger. Now, I've also spent some time in Southern California, so I grew up going to In-N-Out after going to the beach or after Pee Wee football games or after high school football games, whatever it was. Like, In-N-Out's kind of a staple within the state of California. Same thing I said about A&M and Whataburger is true about USC and In-N-Out. If you grow up in that region, you understand the brand, you understand the history, you understand the pageantry and the prestige of that In-N-Out logo. Same thing with USC, man. Like, you do your homework, got some hardware on the mantle. Believe it or not, In-N-Out has been voted the best burger in all of the country. Going to get some back and forth from that. That's okay. But even with that being said, I think there needs to be some juice around that logo and around In-N-Out. So with that being the case, nobody is questioning In-N-Out and their burgers. Nobody is questioning USC and their offense. I think a lot of folks would say, it's overrated. The numbers would indicate otherwise. There's a strong track record of burgers and offense. Now, the thing that people are a little bit divided upon or maybe have a negative opinion on is the French fries. Now, I personally think that the French fries aren't bad. I think there is just a little bit of some work to be done. If you're going to In-N-Out anytime in the near future, you order those fries well done, you add a little extra salt, and you're good to go. It's kind of the situation right now with the defense. There are some things there that could be put together a little bit better. Hasn't been previously, but Danton Lynn is now into the fold. Can we make that defense a little bit more salty and make it a little bit more well done? Maybe so. And if we do, hey, maybe that changes the way that you view In-N-Out and the way that you view USC nationally. So USC, to me, is In-N-Out Burger. Colorado and Coach Prime, on the other hand, they're Subway. And Subway now, national brand, nationally relevant. Mixed opinions, too. Some people say Subway's the best sandwich that you can find. Other people say I wouldn't go near Subway if that was the last restaurant on the face of the planet. I'd rather starve to death. With that being said, the thing with Subway, man, you get something new every single time. Every single time you get something new. Like, in terms of how you can order there, it's custom, right? You can get ham and cheese one week. You can get turkey bacon ranch the next. You get meatball sub. A lot of different ingredients to pull from. That's what Coach Prime's doing right now through the portal. Different ingredients at this point in time every single year. He's been there 2 years, but he's flipping over the roster every single year. Different ingredients. The question now is the quality of the ingredients. All right, like I love ham and cheese from Subway. I'm not 100% sure that ham and cheese is going to be creme de la creme, 100% the best ham they can offer me. But still, it's good. It's solid. I like the direction of it. We'll see where things are headed in the future. The concept is there. The ingredients are the real question when you talk about Subway, you talk about Colorado. Last one to get to here, Ohio State, the good folks in Columbus, went back and forth on what we should make them. I got them as Five Guys. And the thing with Five Guys, massive brand, again, major following, really good ingredients. The thing, though, it's a little bit expensive. And God bless Ohio State, man. This past portal cycle, they got out the checkbook if we're going ahead and doing 2-2, and they made sure they got the ingredients they needed. Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Downs, kind of the same deal with Five Guys, man. Like, you understand, you walk up to that counter, you better be ready to pay somewhere north of $20 for your meal. Now, it's a great meal, really good ingredients. Is it worth what you paid for it? You got to wait till you get to the table and have the meal. Ohio State, is it worth all the legwork you did on the NIL front to acquire this talent? Remains to be seen. Remains to be seen. But I'm a big fan of Five Guys. I think Ohio State's in good position this upcoming season to make some really, really big noise. Let me know what y'all think in the comment section. Subscribe to the channel. Let me know what y'all think in the comment section, who you believe your favorite college football team is when it comes to a fast food restaurant. I see OG Gary already in the chat saying Utah is Chipotle. I like that take. I do. You know what you're getting. It's usually very good ingredients, very, very sturdy, very standard. I like that. So maybe if y'all like this, we'll do some more segments like it in the future. But that's really what May is for, is figuring out who your favorite football team is as a fast food restaurant. Again, live chat is back tomorrow in terms of us interacting together on the air. This is awesome. We're so grateful for y'all being tuned in, for y'all making this show what it is, and for y'all treating college football like the year-round sport that it is, man. This is a blast. We're grateful for y'all. We love y'all. We appreciate y'all. Subscribe on the way out. We're going to keep this party rolling, and we will see y'all next time.